In this video, we'll talk about preparing and planning for sales dialogue. Within the lecture, we'll talk about prospecting and what do we mean by the sales funnel. We'll discuss information that's needed to gather in order to begin the sales dialogue process. We'll discuss ways to communicate effectively with prospects and customers. And then we'll take a look at the sales dialogue template, which is a useful tool that can be used for planning an organized sales dialogue or presentation. And this will lead us into linking buying motives to benefits of the seller's offering. First, let's look at the strategic prospecting process. This is also known as the sales funnel. At the very top of the funnel, we have generating sales leads. This could be a long list of potential customers that you could talk to in order to sell your product or service, but doesn't necessarily mean that they all are qualified, meaning that they might not all be ready to go through the sales process with you. So this is what we mean by qualifying sales leads. After we qualify the sales lead, determine the sales prospect, prioritize them, and then begin preparing for a sales dialogue. The remaining stages in the trust-based sales process would follow. These could even represent potential new customers or opportunities to generate additional business from existing customers. You may hear the term sales funnel or sales pipeline to describe this particular process. Let's talk about information gathering to prepare for sales dialogue. It's important for salespeople to be ready and armed with some information before they begin speaking with the customer or prospective customer. They should have some basic information about the prospect and the company, information about the selling situation and the buyer's communication style, if possible. They can use a lot of sources of information to achieve this. Information about the selling situation could include the type of purchase, their motivation for buying, maybe who their current supplier is, which would qualify as a competitive background. They may also be able to gather information about who's in the buying center and what their available budget might be. Sources of information to be able to find this info would be online searches, social media, annual reports, and even some company databases, or perhaps a personal contact with a prospect. Here are some particular details that might classify as information about the buyer. Keep in mind, some of it could be on a more personal level. Maybe you find out that the two of you share a hobby or an interest. It's a good way to break the ice and start building an authentic relationship. If you can gather some information about the company, you should at least know the type of business, maybe a little bit about the history of business. It's probably easy to find out the number of employees and the types of markets that they target. We already mentioned information about the selling situation. It's not necessary to have information on all of these, but at least having a general idea before you go in and meet with a prospect would help your meeting go more smoothly. So let's think about planning our sales dialogue and presentation. Keep in mind that we're talking about a customer-focused sales dialogue. That means that most of the conversation should be centered around the customer and not the salesperson and their product. The term sales call is a general term that means an in-person meeting between the buyer and the salesperson or the sales team. And the purpose is to discuss business or how to resolve a need. Within the sales call is a lot of sales dialogue, so conversations back and forth. The purpose is to initiate, develop, and enhance customer relationships. Within the sales dialogue, at some point, there should be a sales presentation, which is a comprehensive communication that is designed to persuade the customer to make a purchase. It wouldn't necessarily happen right away. Sometimes a sales presentation can last several meetings before it's complete and before the buyer might be willing to say yes. Here's a couple different types of sales communications. They could be canned presentations, a written sales proposal that's maybe emailed over to the prospect, or an organized sales dialogue and presentation. These are the ones that we're going to focus on for the most part. The organized sales dialogue addresses individual customers and different selling situations, so they're very adaptable, allow flexibility that can adapt to buyer feedback, either right on the spot or perhaps in a follow-up meeting. And these are the most frequently used format by sales professionals, and they tend to develop trust-based selling and trust-based relationships more easily. An organized sales dialogue, then, is usually several sales conversations that involve the process of converting a prospect into a customer, but it's typically over multiple encounters. And it may come before or follow other types of sales communications like the written sales proposal. So thinking back to the trust-based selling process, we consider it a need satisfaction consultative model. At the top, we have our adapt question sequencing. This is where we're developing and understanding needs. Then we transition and we go into need awareness. This is where, as the salesperson, we help the prospect understand where their needs are and become aware of them. And it also lets us know, as a salesperson, what products or services we may have in our product arsenal to help meet their needs. And this will trickle down to need fulfillment, where we can talk with the client about features, advantages, benefits of our products that may help meet their needs. So let's take a look at the sales dialogue template. This is a really good format for preparing for your first in-person sales dialogue where you link a customer's needs with your product or services benefits. We have in part A, the company and key person information, and maybe any other influences that might be important in their purchase decision. It's always important to include a statement of the customer value proposition. What this means is that you as the salesperson have specifically recognized how you will add value to the buyer's business. You should include a brief description of the product or service in that space. In number 3, your sales call objective doesn't necessarily have to be making a sale. It might be supplying critical information to the client. It might be gathering more specific information from the client or prospect. It may be getting a follow-up sales call within the next week or 2 weeks. But it's important to know what your sales objective is so that you know if it's been accomplished. In part 4, this is where you will link the buying motives, benefits, support information, and reinforcement methods. It should address all the buying motives of all of the people who will be involved in the sales call. The buying motives should focus on what is most important to the prospect in their purchase decision. Then you should be able to match specific benefits of your product or service to their buying motives. And then in part C here, what information do you have to support your claims for those benefits? And do you have any methods for reinforcing what you've just said? This could be where you use your sales aids or collateral material or testimonials from other customers. In part 5, it may be a good idea to keep track of the current suppliers that the customer has used. At some point in time, it's likely that you will have to compare your product or service to either their current suppliers or potential suppliers. These are your other key competitors. And beginning the sales dialogue. This is where you will write out a basic script for how you will begin the first few minutes of the sales call. You always want to begin with an introduction, a greeting between yourself and the buyer. You want to thank them for meeting with you and spending their valuable time. And then outline the agenda for the meeting so that they know what you will cover in the time that you have to spend together. From there, you should jump right into the adapt questioning sequence. Transition to other parts of the sales dialogue when it feels natural to do so. Don't feel that you have to stick to the assessment, discovery, activation, projection, and transition format if the buyer takes you in a different direction. Also keep in mind that sometimes these questioning sequences might take place over several different sales conversations over quite a long or short period of time. Other times, it can be concluded in one single sales call. In part 7, you should outline what you believe the prospect will bring up in their meeting with you. Do you think they'll have any specific questions? A seasoned salesperson typically finds that customers tend to ask the same questions over and over. It's like your FAQs, if you will. And how do you respond to those questions? And then you should think about earning commitment and building value through follow-up. Let's talk for a second about engaging the customer. In most cases, a sales call begins with an appointment. It's unlikely that you can walk through the door on a cold call and sit down with a prospect for a sales dialogue meeting. The chances of you getting an appointment would improve if you give the prospect a real reason as to why an appointment should be granted, if you request a specific amount of time, and if you suggest a specific and particular time for the appointment to be held. Asking a question like, "When is good for you?" is not necessarily the best approach. Instead, something like, "I'm free next Tuesday between noon and 3 o'clock. Can we work within that time frame?" That's a better way to ask the question to get the result that you're looking for. In summary, prospecting is important to salespeople. They have to make sure that they qualify sales leads in order to move to the next step. Strategic processing is viewed as the sales funnel. And preparing for sales dialogue should be done methodically, and it should be practiced. You can do it at home on your own. You can practice with some of your other sales professionals.